Perhaps you are planning a new car audio system and you find yourself wondering, how much amplifier power should I have for the subwoofers and how much amplifier power should I have for the mid-bass, mid-range, and tweeter speakers? What is a good balance between the two? If I'm just adding a subwoofer to a factory car audio system, at what point does the subwoofer power become overbearing in relation to the rest of the speakers? In this video, we're going to talk about power balancing and why it's important on your quest to install an amazing car audio system. Hey, I'm Mark, welcome to CarAudioFabrication. Here on this channel, I do car audio builds and reviews, and I love helping you learn how to design, build, and install your dream car audio system. Music alone is a powerful thing, but when we can truly experience the music and have it be powerful and sound amazing, there's just nothing better than that. I have tons of other car audio videos here on this channel, so if you're new here, check them out. And in the meantime, let's get into this video. So when I first got into car audio, the first upgrade that I ever did was adding two 12-inch subwoofers to a factory system. All of my buddies had car audio systems, and of course I had to outdo them, so I got a 1200 watt subwoofer amplifier. So what happened? Of course there was a ton of subwoofer output, but overall the system was just not fun to listen to. As soon as I would turn up the volume high enough in order to actually hear the mids and highs, they would become distorted and just sound muddy and unclear. The problem was I was needing more power and more performance out of those speakers in order to match the subwoofer amplifier, but it just wasn't there, so it wasn't possible. This is a common issue for car audio newcomers. I totally understand it. You want to have massive subwoofers, you want to have insane amount of power and massive bass, but to make your system truly sound amazing, you have to adhere to the rules of what I call power balancing. So here's the way it works. We're going to break our power into two different categories. The first category is amplifier power that is for subwoofers. In other words, our speakers that are playing from the range of frequencies from like 20 hertz up to 80 hertz. Next, we have essentially the rest of the power for all the other speakers, everything that covers the audio range from 80 hertz all the way up to 20 kilohertz. Everything else covers our mid-bass, our mid-range, and our tweeter speakers. So for our power balancing rule of thumb, just remember that there's two different categories, power for subwoofers and power for everything else. Before we move on, I want to clarify that whenever I mention power in this video, I'm referring to watts RMS or constant power. I am not referring to max power, just ignore that. As far as we are concerned for looking at the power of these amplifiers, we're going to be looking at the constant power ratings. So here's the power balance rule of thumb. Let's start with a system that when you sum the two different categories, you have less than a total of 400 watts. For system power less than 400 watts, you should try to stick to a 50% to 50% relationship between the two categories. In other words, let's say we're using a factory head unit and it's 100 watts RMS. 100 watts should be 50% of our total system power. So since we're using the head unit to power everything in our speaker category, we want to use our new subwoofer amplifier to power the subwoofer category. If 50% of our power is 100 watts in the speaker category, that means that for our subwoofer category, we should also only use 100 watts. Now we can deviate from this slightly and we can use a 40% to 60% split. As an example, say that we still have the factory head unit that's 100 watts, we could use an 150 watt amplifier for the subwoofer, and that would give us a 40% to 60% split. In other words, the radio is accounting for 40% of the total system volume, and the subwoofer amplifier is now 60%. I consider the range from a 50-50 split to a 40-60 split acceptable for total powers less than 400 watts. So using that example with the 100 watt factory amplifier, where you start to get into issues where the speakers can't keep up is when you use over 150 watts of power for the subwoofer. Now I already know what you guys are thinking, Mark, the majority of us are using way over 400 watts total for our system. And you're right, and that's why we're going to spend a little bit more time on explaining the second part of this rule of thumb for when you're using over 400 watts total. When our total system power is over 400 watts, we can be more lenient with the ratio and have more power applied to the subwoofer. When we're using over 400 watts of total system power, I recommend a ratio from a 40-60 split all the way up to a 25-75 split. As an example, let's say that for my speaker category, I'm using this 4-channel 800 watt amplifier. That means that you could use a 1200 watt amplifier for the subwoofer, or you could even use up to a 2400 watt amplifier for the subwoofers with this 800 watts for the speakers. Now, how did I do that math? I promise you guys it's really simple. I'm going to show you real quick and give you a lesson on ratios. You guys know that I said that we can use from a 40-60 split all the way up to a 25-75 split. So let's say we know that we want to use this 4-channel 800 total watts amplifier for our speakers. The percentage on top of each of these equations represents the speaker amplifier. So I can put 800 on the top. So in this first example, I want to find out the bottom, what that value will be for the subwoofer amplifier. We're going to be determining a range that we can use for the subwoofer amplifier. For the low end of the range, we're going to use the 40-60 split. So let's write 40/60. We need to know this value here, X, in order to determine how many watts we need for our subwoofer amplifier. Now I know this might look like a daunting math equation, but it's really not that bad. In order to solve for X, all we have to do is take 800 multiplied by 60, so 800 times 60, which equals 48,000, and then we'll divide that value by 40. So 48,000 divided by 40 equals 1200. So what we've done is we have solved for this value here. X is going to be 1200. So in other words, when we're using an 800 watt amp for our speakers going by the 40-60 rule, we can use a 1200 watt amp for our subwoofer. Let's go through this math real quick one more time just so you guys fully understand. Let's say that we're using an 800 watt amplifier still, and this time we're going to abide by the 25-75 rule. And again, we want to find X. All we do is we multiply whatever's here by whatever's here. So 800 times 75, which is 60,000. And then we divide that by whatever value is on top here, in this case, 25. So in this case, we get 2400. So X equals 2400. In summary, since we're using over a total of 400 watts for the entire system, we know that we can use a ratio from 40-60 up to 25-75, and we found that, in other words, with this 800 watt amplifier, I can use anywhere from 1200 watts up to 2400 watts for my subwoofer power. And the way to look at this is you could even use a 50-50 split, which is more of a sound quality type install. So you could have your 4-channel 800 watt amp and then a 1-channel 800 watt subwoofer amplifier. Or if you're kind of looking for a good balance between sound quality and bass output, a good pair would be the 800 watt amp with this 1200 watt subwoofer amplifier. And then finally, if you were just going for massive bass on the high end of the spectrum, you could use a 2400 watt amplifier or two 1200 watt amplifiers for your subwoofers, and an 800 watt amplifier on your speakers will be able to keep up. So now that we understand power balancing between our speakers and our subwoofer amplifiers, we're on our way to making a great sounding car audio system. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I know YouTubers all the time, they're always saying, hey, can you hit that like button? It really does help. So if you don't mind, if you enjoyed the video, if you can give it a thumbs up, it'd be appreciated. If you're new here, I have some other videos on screen that I think you might be interested in, so you can check those out there. A special thanks goes out to John, Brian, John, Ali, Steve, Jerry, Emmanuel, Truman, James, and Colin, and the rest of the Patreon member team. A big thanks to those guys for helping me with the making of these videos. If you'd like to learn more about that, details down below. As always, my friends, thank you for watching.